Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would do a little small series. It'll probably be about 4 parts, maybe 5 parts, in which I cover a little bit about what's going on with conjugate training, and specifically with what I do as it pertains to it, because I get a lot of questions on it, and my actual workouts are a bit hard for everyone to follow because I film all 4 of my main sessions every week. And so I thought I would kind of cover this in a several part series and break down the different parts of conjugate training because it's important that you understand that you are generally training 3 completely separate forms of training all periodized into the same week. So to understand what the max effort part is, people need to realize that with max effort training, you're taking a couple of lifts every week. Now in my case, currently, I'm doing just squat variations and bench variations, and I do some heavy work with other things, including my classical lifts, including deadlifting, things like that. But the actual main lift is that you build to a max on each of your max effort days. And that is that you build to a max. You build to a weight that you either get very close to failure on or which you almost grind, and which you know that if you went heavier, you would probably fail. And in some cases, you do take it all the way to an actual breakdown. So with max effort training, you are training to a max. You're training to a 1 rep max. Now, can there be exceptions to that? Can you have days to where you're not feeling 100% and maybe you only you do a 2 rep max or a 3 rep max or something a little lighter? Sure. But the whole point here is that on this particular aspect of your training, you are training for maximum strength. And you're doing it with variations of your classic lifts. Now, in my case, you guys see me doing different things. You see me doing box squats with safety bar, with chains, with bands, or doing it with my Olympic bar. And in some cases, you'll see me doing them with no accommodating resistance. But I'm mostly doing box squats on that, although you guys have also seen me do a normal back squat. And the same thing with the bench press, doing chains, reverse bands, floor press, and doing even the floor press with straight weight, reverse bands, chains, things like that. We do these different variations because what you are doing on this, you are trying to get around the law of accommodation. Because what happens when you keep hitting the exact same lifts over and over and over, your body tends to adapt. And usually the West Side guys, for example, and Louis Simmons, they believe that you'll regress after 3 weeks of doing it. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but the point is their system does work for this. And so what you are doing is that you are rotating through a variety of exercises. And you don't ever repeat the same max effort exercise more than once in a month. Sometimes you might go several months. But usually you'll chart these things. You'll keep in my case, a spreadsheet of it. And you rotate through these lifts. And every time you do that new variation of the lift, you're trying to hit a PR. Now, a lot of people have explanations as to why this works. But I believe personally, and this is my opinion, just my opinion, I believe there's a psychological component to that. And I've also heard people like Louis Simmons describe it as you don't want to get beat up. You don't want to get beat up by the same fighter or get beat by someone in the race over and over again. In other words, if you get beat by someone, you're not going to go challenge them again until you know that you're better. So the whole idea with this form of training is that you don't get psychologically beat up. You don't repeat a lift that you know that you're not going to be better at next time. So you allow all the other aspects of your training to make you stronger, to make you bigger, to improve your speed strength, all of this stuff, so that when you hit this lift again, you will PR every single time that you do it. And they're strength testers. That's a big part of it. This isn't just about building maximum strength. That is part of the way you train it. The other thing is to test maximum strength. And so people say, well, what do you mean? Well, the idea here is that if you space these out enough and you are making continual progress, and you should be making continual progress, that's the point of any form of concurrent periodization, because you're not separating stuff into phases. Your phases are individual days or individual parts of a workout. You should be getting somewhat stronger all the time. And the reason they're strength testers is that you can assess how much your strength is increased. In other words, you might only do this one lift once every 5th week, once every 8 weeks, once every 12 weeks, depending on how many variations you put in there. But you know what you hit last time. And it's one thing when it's a lift that you're new to, because we can talk about, well, you detrain that movement pattern, but only to some extent, because if you're doing close variations, you're not truly detraining. You really aren't. But what ends up happening is that you have done this lift several times. And it's one thing when you're establishing a baseline. It's another thing when you've now hit this lift 3 times, 4 times, whatever on maxes over the course of months, you can look at that and say, okay, well, I did on this box squat with my bar and 65 pounds of chains. I did 350 last time, and I came in and I did 365 this time. I've increased it 15 pounds. All right, that's a strength tester. Now, if you're new to the movement, you're usually going to see an increase the second time you do it no matter what, right? Especially if you've gotten even remotely stronger because you're still you're training those movement patterns. But when you've done it several times, you can actually look at from time to time how much weight you've gained on these close variations, and you can probably extrapolate that out to your classic lifts. You can honestly assess your strength improvements based upon that. You can assess your strength improvements based upon that. In other words, if it went up 5 pounds, you can assume that maybe your main lift has gone up about 5 pounds. If it's gone up 15 pounds, you can assume probably close to 15 pounds. It should carry over, particularly if it's a variation that addresses your weaknesses, right? If it's a variation that addresses the weak links in your training, then you know when you got stronger on it, your main lift has gone up. So they are strength testers. They're strength testers. But they're only strength testers if they hit your weaknesses personally, right? If they hit your personal weaknesses on your big lifts. But even then, getting stronger at any lift will make you stronger. So the idea here is that you obviously want to get stronger every time you do it from a psychological perspective. And because you're PRing every single week, it creates a winner's mindset. There's a psychological aspect to the max effort training that doesn't get addressed enough. Missing lifts or not hitting PRs or regressing is demoralizing to an athlete. It is psychologically demoralizing. When you come in and every week you PR on something, it psychologically ingrains in your mind that you're getting stronger, that you're winning, that you're doing better, that you're improving. It programs you to always improve. It programs your brain to realize that you are always improving. All right, that has a very powerful psychological effect on an athlete. It has a very powerful psychological effect. And I think that part of this doesn't get addressed enough when people talk about the max effort training, but I think with the rotating the lifts, that's one of the biggest benefits. That is one of the biggest benefits. The other thing to think about when you're doing this is because you are training for maximum exertion, this will carry over. In other words, in order to get maximally strong, you have to train with maximal weights. But maximal weight doesn't mean you're lifting the heaviest weight through any means necessary. It means you're lifting the maximum weight on any exercise. In other words, we don't mean necessarily cheating so that you can lift more weight. You're having to muscle through the weight. And when you're doing all these different variations, you start losing the ability to use a lot of technique because there's slight variations. A lot of the technical stuff that you might do to just get slightly better and cheat at a lift, it's hard to do on these. So therefore, you're forced to muscle through them, right? It's hard to use technique with a safety bar with bands on it. It's just straight strength. You have to just push through it. You don't get your same technique work, which is its own thing, because technical mastery is an important aspect of lifts too. But with these, you're only getting some of it. Like on the bench press here, reverse band, sure, you are setting up, you are training the technique of the lift, but it is hard to really to cheat in certain ways, right? You're still muscling through it. But the point is that you're oftentimes, if you pick your lifts correctly, usually on a lot of these max effort lifts, you're trying to select variations that will hopefully be harder at the things that you're weaker at. So in my case, my triceps are a weak link in my benching. So I'm doing a lot of accommodating resistance lifts, right? Because again, they're slightly more tricep dominant. Therefore, my triceps are forced to work harder. So if I get stronger at these, I know that I'm improving. So that's the idea. So you're selecting variations that will address your weaknesses, and then you're training with maximum effort on them, with maximum exertion, with the heaviest weights you can handle. And you do so in that manner to improve your maximum strength. And then you allow your other performance elements to be addressed by the other training, right? This is just one component of the training. one component. It all has to work together, but this is for maximum strength, and it builds you up psychologically, and it trains you to press maximally and muscle through heavy weights through a variety of different planes and angles. So for anyone who's not understanding it, that's why you do it, and that's why you're rotating through the lifts all the time, is number one, a psychological benefit of always PRing. Number two, by rotating through the different ones, you can assess how much strength you've gained over periods of time based upon the different lifts of how much each one has gone up. And you are training yourself to have to muscle through sometimes awkward angles and to lift maximal weights, the heaviest weights you can handle through a variety of planes and angles, and just learn to force your way through it. It trains you to push and squat and pull and all these things with maximum exertion, even when it feels awkward, even when it's weird, even if something has slipped out of its bar path, right? It gets you just generally all the way around strong because of the variations. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.